Let's look at how we can write a statement of intention for the creative writing sack. And this will be based off my essay in this video linked above. And just as a reminder, the statement of intention is basically where you explain and justify the writing decisions made in your creative essay. So it's like doing an argument analysis, but on your own piece. And as always, the full piece is free for you to download, linked below. So that does mean I'm not going to read out every single sentence. But anyways, I'm going to focus on the structure as I go over my statement of intention. And here is an overview for that. And just note, some requirements such as the word limit might be different for each school, so just change the amount of words that you spend on each section depending on your unique situation. So let's begin with number 1, the purpose. So this is where I have the purpose, and the purpose is basically what does your text want the audience to do? Or another way to put it is, why did you write your text? And in my case, it was because when I was reading my author's stories, I saw a lot of characters who would be emotionally defeated at times. And so the purpose of my piece was to encourage readers who are struggling through relationship crises to take control over their own lives rather than collapse in self-pity. So it's almost like a call to action. And when you're talking about the purpose, it's good to talk about who the audience is. For example, I didn't just say readers, I said readers who are struggling through a relationship crisis. So be specific with your audience. And if you want, at the start, you can put a brief summary of your text. And you can follow this sentence stem. So the title of your text is a transformation of, and then insert the author and your text here. But basically, just 2 short sentences, and this covers your first point. Point number 2 is inspiration. And this is quite flexible how you structure it, but it's a good idea to include ideas from all 3 categories, so structural, stylistic, and thematic. So first, I'll touch on structural features. And this is basically how the author has structured their stories. For example, my author has used a lot of flashbacks, so that's what I did in my text as well. Also, I mimicked my author's character development. So basically, how do characters act and change throughout the author's stories? And for example, this is this section here, where I talk about the microevolution. And so I try to incorporate similar character arcs or character plots in my own piece as well. And some other structural features that you can consider include the form of your piece. So is it a diary entry or a reflection? And also you can talk about whether it's a first, second, or third person narrative. These are all structural features. And for each of these, it's just important to note 2 things. The first thing is I back up whatever I'm saying with examples. So for example, when I said third person, I backed that up with a quote that showed third person narrative. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that it's good to say why you included these structural features. So let's use the same example of third person. The reason why I included this was it made designing the plot more flexible, and it allowed me to reflect the characters' feelings more accurately. So the why part is very important. Now, moving on to the next point, or 2B, this is your stylistic features. And this is all your literary techniques, so anecdotes, metaphors, symbols, motifs, colloquial language. So basically anything related to the style of your writing. So here I talk about my fire motif and my Australian slang. And both of these things were chosen because first, they're linked to the author's stories, and second, it makes the piece more descriptive and more authentic. And again, just note that the why part, so why I included these things, are very important. And below, I explain my key symbol, gears, which is the title of my piece. And this entire section is basically me explaining what my symbol means. And then the final part of inspiration is themes. And this includes context, which means where is your story set? Is it set during a particular time where there was particular social values? Or a particular era with particular features that are quite important for your piece? Basically, what were the values at this particular time? And in my text, it was set near Christmas, as I mentioned here, because this is a time where family traditions are forged or tested. So by setting my story in Christmas, this allowed me to make the plot more authentic and more in tune with a real life experience. And of course, I mentioned this a lot of times and I'll keep mentioning it because it's so important. The why part is crucial. So whatever you write, you need to say why you've included that, not just what you included. And then next, I talk about the specific themes of my text. And the actual content here is not too important, unless you're doing my text, of course. But some general things to point out are the use of phrases such as this. So these are just the titles of my text, as a springboard. And this shows that you're drawing upon your text. So you're using it as inspiration. And the reason why this is important is because the text is not called creative writing. It's called reading and creating. So it's after you've read your author's stories that you write your own creative piece. So that means when you're talking about your writing decisions, you need to say how you were influenced by your author. And then I go on to explain my themes, which regardless of your text, you can follow a similar structure, which in this case was I chose to focus on one main theme, so relationships, and I backed that up with some explanation and quotes. And after that, I ended with a brief statement of some other themes. And this is just to show that you can analyze one theme in detail, but you can also identify a group of other themes. So you're covering depth and breadth. And the last part of themes, I included a segment from an interview from my author, which might be useful if that's available to you. But any external sources that you might find helpful, so videos or autobiographies, then you may choose to include that. That was all point number 2, and this is usually the part that takes up most of your piece. And now moving on to the next point, which is strengths and weaknesses. And this is highly dependent on your piece, but here is an example for my piece. And this part is quite generic, so I do think that if this is required of you, you can use a similar structure to what I have here. And then finally, we have the message. And this is kind of optional, but I found it to be a good summative sentence to have at the end. And the message is more so about the big picture of your piece. So what is your piece trying to do on a very holistic and high level? And this is where you try and tie in all your themes and try and present the crux of your piece in one succinct sentence. Alright, so that's my statement of intention. I hope you found that helpful. And if you do have any questions, just leave them below. But other than that, happy writing.